Welcome to the first edition of This Week in Missouri Politics 2019. So much to talk about. We're going to jump into the opinion maker panel. Donna Baringer, state legislator from South City, St. Louis. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Representative Tracy McCreery here in St. Louis. Welcome back. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Representative Gene Evans, Southwest County, St. Louis.
Southwest County, yeah.
Welcome
Manchester.
back to the show.
Good to be here.
And the Dean of the Republican Party, David Barklage. It's amazing. You've elected Republicans when it was hard. Now they're everywhere.
Well, I noticed one thing I just wanted to notice is everybody knows how his voice gets real low when he goes on to TV. You ought to talk on that all the time. You'd convince everybody of everything.
Well, I would
authoritative.
definitely have a reputation of being more masculine. Let's talk about a guy with a deep voice, Scott Fitzpatrick, the new state treasurer, Governor Parsons' latest appointment, maybe the last one for a while. Young guy, House Budget Chair, qualified for the job. Stepped up. I guess he's going to get sworn in a couple weeks. But tell us about Scott Fitzpatrick and maybe why the governor chose him.
Well, I think the governor, was looking to choose a female and to make a statement. I think he probably made a different statement with Scott Fitzpatrick. I think that Fitzpatrick has the opportunity to really grow into a leader. I think he's one of these guys that and it'd be interesting, did the governor pick someone who's going to turn out to really surprise everybody in terms of growing into depth, growing into abilities, things like that? He certainly, as sort of a young member of the House, had a reputation for being solid. The question is, can he translate that? And I think we'll find out if the governor made a phenomenal appointment or not. And, he's got the toughest time because even though the others got appointed into an office, Mike Keogh effectively was a statewide office holder, serving the Senate, had connections. Eric Schmidt had already run before. He's the one that has to really start from ground zero, no name ID and everything else. Again, he's going to earn his stripes. The appointment was a good thing, but you still got to earn your stripes.
Remember this time a few years ago when John Deal moved him to vice chair of budget. There was folks thought maybe he was a little young for that. He grew into that role.
Yeah. And I think the governor has created an opportunity for someone, and it may be a phenomenal appointment, but we'll see.
Representative, you've served with now State Treasurer Fitzpatrick. Tell us about him.
He's a great guy. I mean, I think my first impression of him, he was quiet, and I thought he was really young. And the more I talked to him and got to know him, the more I realized just how bright he really is. And his business experience, in addition to his budget experience, will serve him well in this position.
Tracy McCreery, you've served with Scott Fitzpatrick. I think most people that have served with him have pretty good feeling and good reputation.
Exactly, and I turn to him and his staff often to help me understand the budget. He has a very good grasp of Missouri's budget. But, in big picture, I think Governor Parson missed an opportunity to appoint someone to that position that reflects what the state of Missouri looks like. Women make up more than 50% of the population, and, I know of several women that were very, very qualified for that position, and I would have liked to seen some diversity in the Republican statewide office holders.
I think that's something that I think a lot of fair people would say is that, it's hard to argue with Scott Fitzpatrick's appointment. He's a very qualified person for the job and a good person. But you do look around, there is Sarah Stillman, there's Chris Chin, there's some other women in some higher positions. But you wonder how many people around the governor and that senior level staff, how many people they're reaching out to that are women, because it is a different perspective.
It is, and I'm looking down the road already at 2020 when you've got Republican statewide office holders up on a stage somewhere trying to rally the troops. It's going to look a lot like 1950s America, and I think that's a big mistake, and I think they'll regret not having some diversity in their platform.
Representative Baringer, Scott Fitzpatrick, he's now the state treasurer. Do you think the governor made the right decision?
Well, I as well would have liked to have seen a female get that position. But I did serve with Scott Fitzpatrick on the Joint Committee on Legislative Research on the Personnel Subcommittee, and I was one of the people that helped hire the new Director of Appropriations. So the 3 months working with him, I got to see how he looks at the budget, how he sees the state budget, and that he is very fiscally in tune with what is happening in the state of Missouri. So I did appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing him take that same and place it in the Treasurer's office.
Let's talk about a guy that, Representative Evans, I know you've been a supporter for a long time. That's Elijah Harr. Barring some big surprise, on Wednesday of this week, he'll become the Speaker of the House. It's an interesting face, young guy, right. Very bright future. Tell folks about working with Elijah Harr.
Well, Elijah's got this kind of engaging personality that just makes everyone like him. And he's very, very talented. He's very politically astute. I think the biggest challenge for him is everybody likes him, and it's not going to be fun for him to tell people no sometimes. Sure. What you have to do as a speaker. And so that could be a potential challenge. I don't see anything coming between him and the speakership. I'm 100% confident that he'll be making a speech on Wednesday, and I'm looking forward to it. He'll be up there to to rally us and all the new reps and talk about his vision for the next couple of years.
David Barklage, I've seen some people compare him to like a Marco Rubio type, young guy for the job, will have a lot of support going in. He comes into a situation that's pretty good politically. Tell folks about Elijah Harr. To me, there's a lot of a bright future there.
Well, I think, you know, the House and the Senate is hindered by the fact that you have both bodies effectively bringing in all new leadership. And that's normally, that has not happened, at least in the last 20 years, that you've always had sort of some old hats on one side or the other. Rob Vescovo is now the senior, and he had one deal behind him. And then you had a governor who was appointed who didn't have an election behind him, didn't have a mandate behind him. So there's going to be interesting dynamics. I would say that there's a huge vacuum, and a vacuum creates opportunity. He's got a boyish charm about him. He's smart. He understands the law as an attorney. I think he has a very rare opportunity to sort of step in and to really to own the place, to really set an agenda if that's what he wants to do. So in the absence of a structured senior leadership, you create a void, and a void creates opportunity, and he has the opportunity to really show something.
Donna Baringer, I always think whenever the now Speaker Harr's around, there's a lot of energy. He's got a lot of energy and enthusiasm and things. And I kind of agree with David. There's been a lot of focus on statewide things, but as you know, when the gavel bangs Wednesday, no one's going to care about those statewide folks. They're going to care about the legislature and what happens. I think there's a big opportunity for him to really, all the potential people have said, oh, this is the rising star, this is the guy. Well, now's the time, right?
I agree. And I look forward to hearing his speech because I want to see what his agenda is, what he thinks is the most important. And I'm also very curious to see, because we're going from Todd Richardson, and I felt he was very nice. And I don't know that when Elijah comes on, if we're going to have more PQs or less PQs. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to work, how it's going to flow on the floor. I'm actually excited for that.
Tracy McCreery, I just think that when you see him coming up, the pendulum swings a lot. You want people that are reasonable policymakers, then you want somebody to burn it down. It seems like a pendulum could swing. He seems like the kind of person that could be a reasonable policy leader, but he can give a good speech. He can fire up a Lincoln Day crowd, but he also doesn't have to go and showboat on the House floor.
Right. I think he's self-confident, which is helpful. I also think that he realizes that not just Missourians, but Americans want to see elected officials focus on things that we agree on and get some things. Like, there are some really easy things that everybody agrees on that if the speaker, soon-to-be speaker, was wise, he would let us get some of those nonpartisan things done, like a prescription drug monitoring, for example. And those would be some fast victories out of the gate that are truly nonpartisan. And I hope that we see some of that. We
talked about the first speaker from Springfield. Let's talk about the new minority leader. Yeah. You talk about a person with a lot of potential. Crystal Quaid, I think it's interesting. She probably has more different, divergent people pulling at her than anybody else in the state. She seems like she's, out of the gate, picked her spots well.
I agree. I've been very, very impressed with Representative Quaid, and I think it'll be interesting to see the dynamic. So basically, the highest-ranking Republican and Democrat in the House are both from the Springfield region, and I'm really excited to just sort of see that yin and yang.
You came into the House with Crystal Quaid. Tell us about Crystal Quaid.
The best thing I can tell you is that she listens and she gets along with everyone. So whether she agrees with you or not, she is going to take the time to hear why you are on the side of wherever you are on your legislation. And then she tries to bring those two groups together, those two diverse thinking thoughts. And so I'm very excited because she's a Democrat from Springfield, Missouri. So I see a great future for her.
You've served with Crystal Quaid. It's a very tough job. You don't have a lot of carrots or sticks, but you're leading a caucus that is divergent and Republicans. You guys like to try to pick off a couple. Tell us about Crystal Quaid from the other side of the aisle.
Well, I like her personally. I've spent a lot of time with her. We did the freshman tour together. We just did another trip together. I think it's going to be interesting to see if she decides to pick things that we agree on, like Representative McCreery said, that we can work together on, or if she throws bombs. Because one of the things that we've seen in the last 2 years is some of the leaders on the other side of the aisle, rather than working with us, decide to use social media to sort of throw bombs at us, and that creates a lot of dissension, and then you have people on my side of the aisle that are like, forget it, we don't want to work together on anything. So it'll be interesting to see, because from what I've heard, she's got kind of divergence on her side of people saying, no, we want to fight the Republicans on everything, and others saying, well, let's figure out what we can work together on. So it'll be interesting to see which way she goes with that. She does have a good relationship with the incoming speaker, so hopefully they can work together and we can move the state forward.
David Barklage is an issue here. Every Republican talking about coming to the session is tort reform. I assume that's going to be one where the minority will throw some bombs. When people say tort reform, what does that mean to just a regular Missourian? Break it down a couple of things that you think they'll actually focus on and what it would mean.
Well, I think a couple of things is people in Missouri, the average voter doesn't really know what tort reform is or does. We've tested that, and they do understand frivolous lawsuits, and so you'll hear that discussion and that term used a lot. I don't think it's just tort reform. I think that there has to be some system reform, and I think Republicans are going to look at how they can change the court picking process tort reform and court reform sort of go hand in hand.
It's a whole fight. They've never been successful.
And I think it's because it's overreach. I think that both parties have a tendency, when they look at a big issue, in the past at least, to say, let's take 1,000 pages where one paragraph would do. And I think policymakers just get into that. And I think that overreach has kept us from meaningful reform. I think the same thing in tort reform. I think we're going to see some movement to look at where we feel the system is broken. There have been reforms over the last 2 decades on joint and several, which is how much a person is liable, as their percentage in a lawsuit where there might be multiple people that were offenders. So I think they're going to try to look at more meaningful. You have to be careful in tort reform, though, because if you go too far, you actually start penalizing small businesses and people. I mean, Ford makes a mistake. They build a car that blows up. There ought to be some liability. You have small businesses that get screwed by large finance companies. There ought to be some liability. So I think the legislature is going to find a few of those things to fix. But I also think they're going to be looking at court reform.
You know, Tracy McCreery, you come in, Elijah Harr is an attorney. He probably understands more of the actual implication of this. Dave Schatz ain't no lawyer. I don't think he's going to have too much sympathy for folks that are members of the bar.
Right. It's going to be interesting to see that interplay between the House and the Senate for sure. And, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense for the House to spend, days and weeks working on a bill, for example, to just send to the Senate to have it not go anywhere. So I think there's going to be a lot of behind the scenes work that has to happen from all the sides before the Speaker moves forward.
Representative Zillow, you're in that caucus and you're meeting, and the Senate passes a bill, and they say, well, take or leave, we can't get it back to the Senate. I've never seen, no matter where you are in the House, it always ticks off House members when the Senate says, this is all we can do, take it or leave it.
Well, then they're going to run into Rob Vescovo, because we saw last year as they try to do some of that, and he's not having it. So
he leaves it.
Yeah, he was very demanding with them. We had some days in the House floor late in session where we were like, what are we doing? Why are we perfecting bills this late? It was because he was doing negotiations, wouldn't hear any more of their bills until they made some agreements. So Rob Vescovo is a very strong majority leader, a good floor leader, and I think those days of take it or leave it are behind us, at least during Vescovo's tenure.
Representative Baringer, I always thought you come into the House, you had practical experience at St. Louis City Hall. Some of these take it or leave it things, until Democrats can win more races, there's going to be more of those dynamics happen, isn't there?
Yes, I actually can tell you that I'm going to miss Jay Barnes on the floor, because when we talk tort reform, he would very much explain it in detail, because you're right, there are not a lot of lawyers on that floor. And when he did that, then it made people think a minute and take a pause. And you also have to remember that it's emotional when you bring a word up like mesothelioma. That really gets to people's heartstrings. And that will get tort, will put you to sleep, that word, but mesothelioma goes way back and gets people's heartstrings.
I can't say that, so don't ask out the rest of the people.
I think people will miss Jay Barnes, also going to miss Kevin Engler. Two big bulls in that house. Well, hope you'll stick around with us. We're going to come back, talk about the opinion maker panel. We'll talk about next session, more of what it's going to bring. Before you go to the break, I want to take a second, go to showmemissouri.com. That's Missouri with an AH, like it's supposed to be said. We were in Iron County, got to see the Battle of Pilot Knob, visit with some good friends in Iron County. Go to showmemissouri.com and listen to the history of Iron County. We'll be right back after this.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople, while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Looking to get quality insurance at a price you can afford? Now you can, thanks to CFM Insurance. Select from our broad range of farm, home, and rental property coverage. Find an agent right in your local area, as CFM is represented by a network of 200 independent agencies throughout Missouri. For personal and dependable service from a company with a history of insuring the families of Missouri that dates back to 1869, visit WeInsureMissouri.com and find an agent near you today.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
At Ameren, Missouri, we know what light can do. It draws people together and chases monsters away. And if you shine it in the right direction, it will light the path for the next generation, showing them what their tomorrow could look like, and spotlighting the possibilities that lay in front of them. Investing in our community by lighting the way forward. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back this week in Missouri Politics. First edition of 2019. David Barklage, Dean of the Republican Party. Thanks for sticking with us.
Thanks, sir.
Representative Gene Evans, thank you for staying with us.
Good to be here.
Representative Donna Baringer from St. Louis City, glad to have you. And Tracy McCreery from St. Louis County. Let's talk about something that's been in the news all throughout the fall, but I have a sense it's probably going to come to a head now. The Department of Revenue. They've screwed up collecting the revenue, and now twice. And there's been some odd explanations for it, kind of beating around the bush, everybody pointing fingers. This is something, you mentioned Crystal Quaid earlier. I thought this is a very intelligent part for her to pick her spot. The government screwed up.
Right.
She's saying the government should make up for it. That's how it works in real life.
Yeah.
What about the Candyland of government?
Exactly. So Missouri Department of Revenue has admitted that they screwed up, and not only that, they did not communicate clearly with anybody. And I'm concerned about all of the working families out there that when it comes time for their taxes to be done, and on April 15th, there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people that find they owe money that they don't have, and when they were actually expecting a refund. And so I'm really disappointed in the state, and I think that both chambers and both parties have a chance to do the right thing for working Missourians.
Crystal Quaid had a good idea. The government screwed up, so the government should get their money later. It happens in business, it happens in real life. Maybe it should happen to the government too.
Yeah, it should be interesting based on our budget, but I would like to see the Department of Revenue come before the legislature and tell us how did this happen, and make sure it doesn't happen again. Because I spoke with 4 different people last night that do taxes, and even they said they can't figure this out. So if some people who do taxes can't figure this out, how do we expect our constituents to?
Oh, Representative, is there any way that the Department of Revenue doesn't come answer that Republican legislature?
There's some explaining to do, let's face it. So, and I think that, you go back to trust in government, and there's a lot of distrust among politicians in general and in government, and I think we need to hold the agencies accountable just like our constituents hold us accountable.
Well, there's 55,000 state employees, right? If you're the worst state employee, if you're number 55,001, and you look at the Director of Revenue, you got to feel great about your position, because, I mean, if he's not fired, you're good.
Well, here's the other thing, too. A lot of the state employees fall into this dollar amount of income that's going to be most deeply affected by this challenge. And so they're going to be deeply affected. A lot of them live in Jefferson City, so I think we're going to hear from them, and we need to represent them.
Well, this is an issue of competence, right?
Absolutely, and accountability.
David Barklage, right now, if Governor Parson goes down and sees David Dick at Orchland in Pettis County, or he sees my buddy Trent Drake at the grocery store in Bolivar, can he look them in the eye and say, this is the best person to run the Department of Revenue, honestly?
No, look, he's a very practical governor. I sort of liken him to sort of Andy Griffith in Mayberry, is that Andy Griffith is the smartest guy in Mayberry, but he doesn't act like it. And this governor doesn't put on airs or anything else, but I think he's going to look someone squarely, and if they're doing a good job, he's going to stand up and fight for them. If they're not, he's going to knock them out. I think the question here is twofold. Is one, we had a complex tax code that was misapplied. You can understand that can happen. No one's perfect. My teaching to politicians.
Maybe if the tax code's too common for the government to implement, they ought to simplify it.
I agree. But my teaching to politicians is you'll make mistakes. It's how you handle them. And I think you all had it right, it's how Mike Parson and his administration says, are we going to punish people? Are we going to try to work with them? who is going to be punished? The government always makes mistakes, and the problem is it's when they hide those mistakes, and then when they punish you for making them. That's what's unacceptable, and I don't think this administration is the kind of administration that stand for that.
I think Donald Trump's administration would have 2 words for them, I think. Let's talk about Clean Missouri. You've been a person telling me and everyone on this show this is going to be terrible, terrible, terrible,
and
terrible.
You've been reminding me.
Well, I think so. It passes, right? Now it comes in. Republicans want to blunt it. Not about the ethics stuff. I think no one cares. Is it going to matter to a legislator where they pay for a dinner from a lobbyist or either a campaign account that a lobbyist gave them a check for? Not sure it's going to make any difference. But as far as redrawing the lines, what can Republicans do now that it is the law of the land to try to circumvent it before the redistricting process begins?
Well, there's several things, and I'll just say the reason that we have Clean Missouri is not because some friends of mine who are very clever Democrat strategists did something brilliant, got it passed.
It was a very good campaign, yeah.
It was the lack of the legislature addressing meaningful ethics reforms. They are squarely at fault here. And I hope when the legislature gets together and looks at initiative petition reform that they don't set up a situation where the people can't reform things that need to be reformed. But with that being said, there are legal avenues because there are fundamental problems with the equation of making these partisan districts that you can't make unless you disenfranchise blacks. Second, gerrymandering, while it has been tacitly overlooked because people have tried to address compactness, I think it gets into a significant problem where you have a person on Washington Avenue representing people in Washington, Missouri, and especially when you look at those Senate districts, which we've talked about, you could stretch those from St. Louis City out to wherever, if for a partisan purpose to say, I want a district that's 50% Republican and 50% Democrat, and I'm going to disenfranchise everybody from Washington Avenue out to Franklin County. That's not acceptable. So there'll be a test of the districts themselves. There'll be legal test of what was passed. There'll be legislative tests. They could put something on the ballot. But I can tell you this, redistricting is about a 40% polling issue at best. It is complex. People don't really relate to it. And so to get something passed, if you have any kind of opposition constitutionally to overturn this, is going to be very, very tough. So Republicans are going to have to look at several different avenues. I don't know what the creative avenue to get that actually passed would be.
Isn't the argument for Clean Missouri, but whatever the argument was before November, when it passed and passed handily, this is what the public voted for.
Exactly. And I wish Republicans in elected office anyway, would just stop crying about this and stop trying to bend the rules and just play by the rules. So Missourians voted for this for a lot of reasons. They want to have a choice when they go to the ballot box. And I think what the Republicans should be doing is focusing on recruiting candidates that can actually win in a general election. This is all about Missourians want the maps to be drawn fairly and accurately, and ultimately it will give voters a better choice at the ballot box. And so I'm not scared about running in a competitive district, and I think some Republican colleagues should start doing things that can make them be able to win in a fairly drawn district.
Donna Baringer, I think that whether it's fair or not, Clean Missouri has done no favors for Nicole Galloway. Whatever the truth is, she owns redistricting now. It's going to be people she selects. I have a hard time seeing Nicole Galloway gutting districts that are represented by African Americans that are majority-minority districts, which, to be candid, is what you're going to have to do to have these districts. You're going to have to dilute areas that in near your district. I have a hard time seeing Nicole Galloway doing that.
I'm not wondering, and I don't know this for a fact, if the courts aren't going to have to step in here, because the federal law is very clear on redistricting. There's no shades. I mean, this is how it must be. So if these new redistricting don't fall within those guidelines, I've been told it has to go to court and the judges will decide.
Does the legislature say, okay, let's try the courts first and then we'll be there next year?
I agree with Representative Baringer. I think there are a lot of court challenges on this. I mean, we're encountering some things with regard to the Sunshine Law where the attorneys are telling us you can't redact personal information, that's not the way that this law was actually written. It's different than what applies to other agencies. So there's some challenges there that they feel will have to be decided in court. This is going to have to be decided in court. It looks like there's going to be a lot of blurry areas trying to figure out what to do here. I'm in a competitive district. I don't have any fear of being in a competitive district, but I like the compactness, and I certainly don't know if I could fairly represent people that live in downtown and out in Washington as well as people in my area because they may have different interests.
Isn't it true, though, that as far as ethics goes, you could pass an ethics bill every week of session, as long as you're also passing pro-gun bills and pro-life bills and tax cuts, liberal newspapers are going to call you unethical, no matter what you do.
Well, that's true. And the other thing about ethics is, I mean, you either have them or you don't. And so, you know, I was in financial services for many years. They were always passing laws to try to make it more, you know, keep the bad guys out. The people who are unethical find a way around these laws. That's the way it is. And you can't legislate morality, period.
Before we go, Tracy McCreery, there's been a lot of talk about a city-county merger going to a statewide ballot. It seems like legislatively that's the way it would have to go. Seems like there's a plan that is very well thought out, taking a lot of time and some support building to do a statewide vote on a city-county merger. Concerns? Support?
Well, I'd like to see the plan. I watched another show last night, and they're talking about a plan, and I feel like maybe I missed something. I've not seen anything in writing. I've not heard anything, and I feel like anytime there's one billionaire behind something, we all should, our antennas should all go up.
What do you think? You've served on the St. Louis City Council and the state legislature.
Well, I feel that the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County should be able to vote on what they want, but I also heard that currently as it stands, that does have to be done first before it goes to state. But now I heard when they changed it to say, no, we're going to create an entire new county, that would bypass all those rules. So now I'm confused as well.
David Barklage, the politics of this are pretty clear. There's been a big push for regionalism in all corners of the city and the county. A lot of study done. Statewide vote, I think, has a very good chance to pass.
Yeah, I think so. I think until people in Springfield and other places say, do we want to have a government imposed upon us without a vote of the people? I think then it gets a little iffier, but I think with Rex's commitment and things like that, I think it will be challenging to defeat it if that's what some people want to do. I think the other thing, though, that's starting to create a problem, you see the problems with the economic development entity, the regional entity. You're seeing several other entities that are having problems, and so I think they undercut the argument for regionalism.
What do you think? Outstate Missouri votes to merge the city and county?
Why don't we just have the whole country decide if Missouri should merge with Illinois, because they got all kinds of problems, and then we could take them over. I mean, that's how ridiculous this is. It really is. People in Poplar Bluff and Springfield, Carthage, St. Joe don't care about our issues. It should be left to the people here, and I obviously feel very strongly about this.
Our issues are out of time. David Barklage, who won the week?
I think Missouri's new director of the education, she had the job, she was rehired in the job, and from what I hear is that she's converting people both on the left, right, and in the middle about her performance and about what she can do. And I think Peter Hershend and Charlie Shields and the board has made the right decision.
Don't mess with Charlie Shields. Who won the week?
Cody Smith, new budget chair.
Who won the week?
LGBT Missourians, because Speaker Harr and Governor Parson have indicated a willingness to move forward with non-discrimination.
Great. Who won the week?
Nancy Pelosi, now one of the most powerful women.
No question. I'm going to say a guy that maybe not won the week, but I think is important to mention, Terry Nelson, former head of the Carpenters Union, one of the most visionary union leaders in the state's history. He will be very much missed and to a good life. We'll see you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.